SAP keeps an official list of everything that changed between their old system and the new one, between ECC and S/4HANA. That list is 1,514 pages long. Nobody reads 1,514 pages. And here's the good news, you don't have to. 5 changes carry almost all of it. So let me show you the 5. First, the 30-second version of what these two things are. ECC is SAP's classic system. It's been running the world's biggest companies for about 20 years, and it still does, in thousands of them. Surveys in Europe keep finding that roughly half of SAP customers are still on it today. S/4HANA is the replacement, and it is not an update you install on top. It's a different system, rebuilt from the ground up. There's also a clock on all of this. SAP ends standard support for the old world at the end of 2027. I made a whole video about that deadline, it's linked below. Today is about what's actually different between the two. And it comes down to 5 things. The database, one table, the business partner, the screens, and the planning run. Quick thing before we dive in, I make videos like this every single week. If you're learning SAP right now, subscribing is the easiest favor you can do yourself. Okay, number 1. Let's start at the foundation, the database, because every other change grows out of this one. ECC never cared which database you ran it on. Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, your choice. S/4HANA runs on exactly one database, SAP's own. It's called HANA. No Oracle option, no Microsoft option. One database made by SAP, non-negotiable. So what's special about it? 2 things, and I keep this simple. First, HANA keeps its working data in memory, in RAM. A classic database reads most things from disk, and disk is slow. Think of it like this. Disk means walking to the archive room every time you need a file. In memory means every file is already open on your desk. Second, it stores data in columns instead of rows. That makes adding things up across millions of records extremely fast. And adding things up is most of what a business system does all day. Why should you care? Because of what that speed removes. The old system was full of workarounds for a slow database. Pre-calculated totals, extra copies of data sorted differently just so certain reports would finish. Whole tables whose only job was to make things findable. HANA doesn't need those tricks. It adds up the real numbers, live, every time you ask. Hold that thought, because it explains the second difference. Here's a moment from my consulting life. Years ago, end of the month at a client. The finance team stayed late because the numbers in financial accounting didn't match the numbers in controlling. Same company, same month, 2 different answers. And in ECC, that was normal. Finance data lived in one set of tables, controlling in another, fixed assets in another, inventory values in yet another. Plus all those totals and copies we just talked about. Keeping them in agreement was actual scheduled work. S/4HANA replaces that whole zoo with one table. 1. Finance, controlling, assets, margins, material valuation, every posting from all of them lands as one line, in one place. SAP calls it the Universal Journal. On a project, you'll also hear its technical table name. It's on screen right now. But the idea is what matters. One source of truth. Every report reads from the same lines. There's nothing to reconcile anymore because there are no 2 versions of the truth. Inventory got the same cleanup. Goods movements used to spread across more than 26 tables. Now, 1. And one detail interviewers love. In S/4HANA, cost elements, that's a controlling thing, are now simply GL accounts. If that sentence means nothing to you yet, that's fine. If you've worked in ECC Finance, that sentence just rearranged your world. This is the deepest change of the 5. The screens are what people see. This is what actually changed. Difference 3 sounds small and causes the most project work of all 5. In ECC, a customer was one record in the system and a vendor was a completely separate one. But think about a real company. Microsoft buys from you and sells to you. In ECC, that's 2 records, maintained twice, with the same address in 2 places, quietly going out of sync. S/4HANA has 1 record instead, the business partner. 1 partner with roles. The same record acts as the customer in one deal and as the supplier in another. A cleaner model, honestly. The model the system probably should have had all along. Here's what makes it a big deal in practice. It is mandatory. You cannot move to S/4HANA without first converting every customer and every vendor into business partners. The migration tool checks it and refuses to start if it isn't done. On real projects, that one step can take months, because it means cleaning up decades of messy customer and vendor records. Little insider tip: if you ever hear consultants groan about something called CVI, this is what they mean. Which brings me to a question I genuinely want answered. The system you touch at work, is it ECC or S/4HANA? Type ECC or S4 in the comments. Just that, nothing else. It tells me who's watching and it decides what I make next. Difference 4 is the one everyone notices in the first 5 seconds. How it looks. ECC means SAP GUI. Gray screens, dense fields, transaction codes you type from memory. Genuinely powerful, but it looks like 1998, because parts of it are. S/4HANA's face is called Fiori, tiles in a web browser. You get the apps that fit your role, and it works on a phone or a tablet. A manager can approve a purchase order from the train. That was science fiction in the old world. Now the honest part, because this gets oversold. The old screens did not disappear. Under the hood, most classic transactions still run, and on real projects, consultants use both, every day. What matters is direction. Fiori is where SAP builds everything new. Learn it, get comfortable in it. But nobody is taking your transaction codes away tomorrow. Last one, and it's the best example of what the new database buys you in daily work. Manufacturing companies live on something called MRP, Material Requirements Planning. In one sentence, the system checks everything you need to build, checks everything you have, and creates orders for whatever is missing. In ECC, that check ran overnight. You scheduled it for 10 in the evening, it chewed through the whole plant for hours, and planners got their answers the next morning. Something urgent changed at 9 a.m.? See you tomorrow. In S/4HANA, there's a new version of that run, MRP Live, built to run inside the database. And it's fast enough to run during the day. Let me be precise here, because this one gets overclaimed. The classic nightly run still exists, and plenty of companies still use it. This is not magic real-time planning. But a planner who can rerun the numbers at lunch instead of waiting for tomorrow morning, that's a different working day. And that's the pattern of this whole video. Same process, same purpose. The slow parts removed. So, 5 differences. And here's my honest take after living through this shift on more projects than I can count. S/4HANA is what ECC always wanted to be. Not change for its own sake, a cleanup. Now, before I close the loop, 2 myths to clear out because you will meet them. Myth 1. S/4HANA is basically ECC with a nicer interface. You now know better. The deepest changes are invisible. One database, one table, one partner. Myth 2. People say HANA when they mean S/4HANA. HANA is the database. S/4HANA is the business software on top. Mixing those up in an interview stings. And if you're switching careers into SAP right now, hear this. None of your process knowledge is wasted. Companies still buy, build, sell, and pay, exactly like before. The plumbing changed. The business didn't. Remember those 1,514 pages? You now hold the 5 that matter. The database, one table, the business partner, the screens, the planning run. That's the map. Everything else is detail on top of it. I do this twice a week. Subscribe, and the other 1,509 pages get a lot easier.